Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And I'm delighted because today I am joined by Jerry Cantor, who has written a book called The Emotional Roots of Chronic Illness, Homeopathy for Existential Stress. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you for having me, Isabel.
Well,
Anna.
yeah,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be the first to call me Isabel. That's fine. um, so your book really caught my eye because of the second part of the title, particularly Homeopathy for Existential Stress. And the reason is that over the years, as an analytical hypnotherapist, one of the things that I feel is that a lot of the problems that people are coming with boil down to an existential crisis. So when I saw your title, I thought, I want to know more about what you're doing. So it might be good to talk about that a little bit. What is existential stress in your mind?
Yeah, I really would have preferred the term existential quandaries because stress understates it so much. Um, so, existential psychology grew out of existential philosophy. This whole idea of what's the meaning of things, especially in the wake of World War II and the Holocaust and the discovery of the atomic bomb, people began to wonder what the heck's going on here. Currently, the word existential seems to mean, oh my God, we're all going to die, and related to the climate crisis or the possibility of a Holocaust-like war. But it actually means it's a search for meaning. What is the point of everything? And it has roots in religious thought, dark night of the soul, sort of things in Christianity. There's a lot of things in life seem to be very difficult to find meaning in. Severe loss, inexplicable events. So it's the idea of looking for meaning and continuing through that. So existential psychology has taken that on. Full stop. They've just trying to help people get through their life and manage their crises. What I have done is I have found these 5 existential questions which emerge from my analysis of Chinese medicine and homeopathy. And the questions, first of all, existential questions do not have a yes or no answer, but they have a very powerful charge, and that charge can make us ill. And I've connected this with the 5 classical miasms of homeopathy, so that I'm saying if you cannot resolve the charge of question 1, then you are at risk of developing tuberculosis and the tubercular miasm. If you can't solve the second question, and we can go through what those questions are, you're at risk to what the homeopaths call sora, which is the original disease in homeopathic theory from which all the other diseases came from. And the other classical miasms and the diseases related to those are syphilis and gonorrhea and cancer. So in my book, which is kind of a philosophy of medicine book, it connects the dots between what Chinese medicine calls the 5 phases, what I call sense dimensional analysis, because there are 5 senses. Each of the senses has a purview over the existential quandary, the miasm and the disease, and actually also physiological systems, respiration, metabolism, reproduction, the nervous system, and so forth. So it connects all these dots. But the questions themselves are, I think, the foundation of what it is to be a human being. We all have these 5 questions. We never resolve them entirely. Some of them have more of an affinity for different stages of life, but they for sure have a tremendous power.
Can you explain to the audience what a miasm is? Because I think that's a term that will be new to many people.
Oh, sure. Well, there are these 5 diseases which have gone through the population and left not just the people who are suffering with them sick, but had an impact on the descendants of those people. And this appears in the legacy. So in homeopathy land, If we talk about the cancer miasm, the tubercular miasm, the gonorrhea miasm, everybody has had an ancestor who's had one of these diseases. It's not like anyone is free from it. And there's a positive side to it too. These diseases have left positive and negative imprints on us through the generations. So, but every once in a while, one of them rears its head and has a disproportionate presence in our life. And so the existential question that pertains to that really is very prominent and can make us susceptible to disease. And that prompts homeopaths to look at certain categories of homeopathic remedies. They're remedies that pertain to the psoric miasm, to the tubercular miasm, to the cancer miasm, the syphilitic miasm, and the gonorrhea miasm. And before that was discovered, homeopathy was limited with regard to chronic illness. It was very good for a lot of acute conditions, for infectious conditions, but things which were chronic, this idea of the miasms has to be developed so that we can work at a deeper level and treat conditions which are rooted in our genetic or epigenetic legacy.
So we're looking at epigenetics here, in terms of understanding. Maybe we can think of it as disease types.
Yes, absolutely. That's right.
And those disease types are linked to emotional distress of some kind, which I've thought has links with an existential crisis, as I call it, and you're seeing it also in terms of existential questions. So let's talk about those existential questions.
Yeah, sure. I think they're important. I also think they have an application to the development of artificial intelligence too. I'll just make a little statement about that. After I wrote this book, I thought, this is rather timely because now in AI, the holy grail with AI is creating humanoids that are going to be increasingly, maximally human-like. And so we are all fearful of who's going to do the programming. Anybody doing the program is going to inculcate a certain kind of bias in these humanoids. So the programmers are having this big discussion. Rather philosophical question is how we can either eliminate bias or put useful bias, beneficial biases in there. And my feeling is that these 5 questions that I have, which represent 5 existential quandaries, are actually functional anxieties, and they should be programmed into the AI of the future, so that the robots can actually go through what human beings have gone through in terms of evolution. It's a fantastic time now. It's to be a good time to be a philosophy student, because we're the philosophers are the ones who decided, been thinking very deeply about what is the human mind. And these questions, and I guess I'll get into them now, I think are at the foundation of what it is to be a human being. So yeah, we'll just go through them one by one, and then we can break them down further. Am I alone in life, or do I act in synchrony with nature and with others? And that pertains to this what I call the sense dimension of touch, whether we're in touch with each other. Physiologically, touch relates to the cardiological system, the heart. We always say this touches my heart, and so forth. And developmentally, it relates to childhood or the early years. And the case I've made is that this relates actually to tuberculosis as a miasm, and I can't explain why right now. It's just too complicated a question, but the book does. The second question is my presence in the world sustainable? And this relates to metabolism. Many diseases are metabolic illnesses. It relates to the sense dimension of taste, because in tasting, we are auditioning raw foods for their appropriateness and their helpfulness in terms of building body tissue. So this is the question of whether I'm able to sustain myself in the world, and it relates more to the adolescent years. Am I oriented in space and time? And this relates to our sense of identity, which develops in adulthood. And it's the sense dimension of smell, because it's through smell that we orient ourselves in space and time. And these are illnesses that have are rooted in grief and identity problems. And also, this is the respiratory system, obviously, in terms of smell. Um, am I oriented in space and time? All these remedies have to do with our sense of identity. What we do and the mission that we have when we become adults, especially for men, is what we do is who we are. The fourth question is, can the boundary between life and death be abided? And this is the deepest one. We can be traumatized on either side of that boundary. We can be traumatized in the sense of we're terrified of death, and well, we want to sweep that issue under the rug. So people who need remedies from that miasm, which is the syphilitic miasm, they might be highly materialistic, driven for sex, want to just live in the here and now and not pay any attention to what's going to come afterwards. They're not interested in a legacy, and that's a whole set of remedies there. If you're very good with that, if you find you're perfectly fine that you with the fact that you're going to die, then your concern would be on the other side of that equation. Have I established a legacy for those who come after me? But this is a familiar one from anyone who's talked about existentialism, what the meaning of death is, and how do we orient ourselves to it. As I say, on both sides of that, that's the syphilitic miasm. We have illnesses for people who are incapable of dealing with it, and those who have thought about it and dealt with it too deeply. And this is at the unconscious level. I'm not talking about how we deal with these in terms of thought. And the fifth one, which is for the Cancer miasm, will the insurrection of my birth be fruitful? I like that one. I mean, it's a very mature kind of deep question. The world is getting along perfectly well, and now you come along. Every birth is an insurrection against the status quo. Now, if through much of your life, we were, much of our lives, we were trying to deal with the issues of the previous existential quandaries, maybe make a living for ourselves, find a partner, and so on. But towards the end of the life, maybe we step back and say, gee, was my insurrection worthwhile? Did I accomplish anything? Will have any meaning whatsoever? And the charge of that particular question, as I make the case in my book, can predispose us to a whole set of illnesses, which would include cancer. But it's the idea of this is the sense dimension of sight. Sight is very panoramic. When we see too much, and then we become angry, and so the emotion that's associated with that is anger. Oh, by the way, I seem to have left out the emotions that relate to each of these five categories. This is the emotion of anger. Going back to the beginning, the first miasm, with the idea of am I in synchrony with nature and others? That's joy. The second one, which is my existence on Earth sustainable? That would be anxiety. Am I oriented in space and time? That is grief, because in Chinese medicine, the lungs are all connected with grief. Can the boundary between life and death be abided? That would be terror or fear. And the fifth one, will the insurrection of my birth be fruitful? That relates to anger. And the trick within that last dimension is converting our anger into something creative, as opposed to lashing out blindly. All the emotions, by the way, are useful tools. No one should say I should never be angry or I should never be anxious. They are like tools that you use them to solve a problem, and then you put them away when you're done. And I can go through that a little bit too, if you like.
Just coming back to the last one about the insurrection of will the insurrection of my birth be fruitful? I think that is one of those that is really important, but I would describe it as pernicious, because many of my clients doubt whether their birth was wanted, whether they have the right to exist, whether they have whether they can justify their existence. So it manifests in different ways. But the idea is, I don't feel like I've really got permission to be here or the right to be here. And so there's a whole host of possible issues that crop up from that. Whether it's, I call it living to pay rent, paying rent to be alive. So constantly having to justify their lives by doing more and more and more
Yeah.
for others, and really trying to prove that they're a good person. That's one possibility. There are many others. But you're right about anger, I think, because there is an anger there, the anger of the baby who feels that it's not wanted and doesn't have the right to be here. And we often have to unravel that
Yes.
to get to a healthier relationship with their lives, actually.
Yes. And that issue, I mean, in a homeopathic intake, that has to be unpacked very thoroughly, because there are versions of that that pertain to the early years, versions of that that pertain to the adolescent years, um, and adulthood and old age. So the remedies will vary according to that. Um, it's just to take an example. If you haven't um, resolved, is my existence on Earth sustainable? You may meet a remedy like lycopodium, which is a highly developmental remedy that pertains basically to the adolescent years. And the feeling there is a deep insecurity, feeling of not being adequate, not being ready for something. Now, early in our life, going back, even back before that stage, there are three big changes we have to go through where we're trading off a state of dependency for a state of independence, being weaned from the breast, being toilet trained, and learning how to read. All those things are an enormous jump from A to B, but they don't always go so smoothly. And if you have a problem with that, there's a hangover that can last into quite a bit of your life. And this profound feeling of insecurity comes. So where interactions feel like one is a winner and a loser. Um, and these are people who get into power struggles all the time, who cannot stand to be in a public speaking situation because they're so outnumbered. They overeat because they're trying to gain some kind of control over their lives. So and there's a lot of anger and frustration in a stage like that. I can give you versions of that for each of what I call the dimensions. But the feeling of, do I deserve to be here? Yes, it has many variants, and I say it does differ based on where you are in life.
Absolutely, yes. So here I find that this is fascinating, but it's almost because it's almost like a little map of the emotional state. So, these are questions, existential questions that we're wrestling with, that subconsciously underpin certain emotions, and the manifestation through behavior. But then here's the thing, is that you're now connecting it with chronic illness. And I think that is another step again. So I spend a lot of time talking about the mind body connection, because we know that what goes on in the mind has it, and emotionally is what we mean by what goes on in the mind, has an impact on the body. But you've actually, there's a system here that you're using, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't invent it, but I have drawn aspects of it from my different kinds of study. Chinese psychology, for example, brought us the five elements or five phases with these five core emotions, but it's not a very sophisticated psychology. Homeopathy has a very sophisticated psychology. I would say it's more psychologically sophisticated than any branch of psychology that we have. So all the remedies that I have, what I've done here is, as I say, I have these five categories of quandaries, and I have identified remedies as subcategories, having themes that are subcategories of those five quandaries. And then the job is to show how that expresses itself through illness. The one nice thing about homeopathy, of course, there's many wonderful things about it, is apparently, apart from the fact that we have cures that are not available in other kinds of medicine, is that it makes it makes the existential quandary knowable, understandable. And that is liberating because we live so much in fear. We think, diseases come out of nowhere, and we need to take tests forever and wait for the results. Oh, the results are inconclusive. Now we got this drug we'll try out on you. In homeopathy, if we can make sense of it, it can almost, well, it can make your life joyful because you were brought on this planet to do certain things, to manifest your karma, become who you're supposed to become, and the diseases are simply the challenges along that road. And homeopathy helps you to negotiate those, and maybe, I think, promotes your karma on this planet, because you cannot do well with a remedy without learning something, without having your perspective enlarged.
Indeed. And I think that many people would say that the physical symptoms that we experience and see as illness are actually symptoms of something else, and an invitation to do some deeper healing, which is what we're talking about. Some people might be a little bit skeptical about homeopathy, and it might be worth just explaining the principles behind how it works.
Oh, sure. And if I wish we had time, the best thing too is to go through a particular remedy and break it down in terms of its themes with regard to the emotion, regard to the existential quandary, the symptoms that it expresses, and so forth, and what you can explain, because that's the meat of the whole thing. Well, anyway, homeopathy. Homeo means same as, apathy means sickness. This is the law of similars, using like to treat like. So the remedies are very dilute. They're very, very dilute. But in a gross amount, they would produce in a group of healthy people the symptoms that in a dilute amount it treats. And there are a couple of metaphors or analogies that can make this really clear. The most basic one is getting back on the horse that threw you. It's unbelievably simple, but if a horse has thrown you, you could say, oh my God, I'm never going to get on a horse again. That's the end of that, which would limit you. Now okay, your life will be okay, provided you never get on a horse. You never have to deal with that. But if you lived in the Wild West and you couldn't live without being a horse person, someone would say, this is intolerable, we got to fix this. And would put you on a gentler version of that horse, maybe a pony or just a gentler version. Now you're on that horse again, and you say, oh my God, I'm on a horse, this is horrible, I'm going to be thrown. You're facing your demons, you're re-engaging with a problem. You're revisiting the scene of the crime under more favorable circumstances. But now you get led around the corral, nothing's happening. And by the time you get off, you say, I'm changed. Something's happened here. Maybe it wasn't all horses, maybe it was just that one horse. I'm okay now. Homeopathy is very much like that, in that the gentler version, your remedy is in a way the gentler version of that horse. It allows you to revisit the scene of the crime under more favorable circumstances. We have lots of words for that. We say we're facing your demons. We're doing the real thing. We're looking at the problem from its origin. We're not trying to sweep it under the rug. But anyway, that's what remedies do. They are kind of a permission slip to the subconscious to re-engage with something. The vital force, which is our word for the subconscious, says, oh, wait a minute, I recognize that. I don't like that at all, but it's such a tiny amount. Give me another shot at this. Last time I engaged with it, I flunked. I gave up the battle, and instead of resolving the issue, I produced symptoms and polarities. But let me re-engage with it again. And this is why people get worse before they get better on a homeopathic remedy often. But the symptoms are completely familiar. They're going back in time and re-engaging with the struggle and winning the second time. And that has tremendous implications. The ramifications of that are the symptoms start to go away, and they develop an awareness of this, and they own their own progress. This is completely different from taking a drug which has side effects, where the body is saying, I can't accommodate this, I can't assimilate this, I don't like this. And the doctor says, well, the good outweighs the bad, take it again, take it again, take it again. So we have processing symptoms. We don't have side effect symptoms in homeopathy. But that is what happens. And this is what people have to get used to. We've sort of grown addicted to getting quick fixes on things so we can move along and be productive in our life. If you really want that, don't go to a homeopath. Absolutely don't. If you want to explore why you're sick, find what the meaning of your condition is, then engage in that process. The remedies are amazing because that processing can take 4 to 5 weeks. 4 to 5 weeks before you graduate from a remedy. But at the end of that, you get this tremendous expansion of your consciousness and awareness of what's going on with you. It's quite an important journey.
It is an important journey, and I think that that is the nature of healing. And the idea of healing by sympathy is a very ancient one, in fact. And for students, say, of medical astrology, for instance, we would know that there are some the best way to treat is to treat with sympathy rather than antipathy. That is only for specific things, because what you want is you want to strengthen the person, so you want to treat with sympathy. And I think that that's what we're talking about here. Just the very word sympathy is important, because it's an intention of understanding and connecting with. So this is a very important healing principle: understanding, connecting, so as to effect change. You talked about the dilution of the substance that is used for treatment, and I'm wondering about the fact that water has memory, and what part you feel that might play in the efficacy of the remedies.
Yes, water has memories, and it gets into very mystical kind of areas. You can impart the energy of an idea by there have been photographic evidence of this. If you beam love into a glass of water, if you look at the water, the molecules will have a certain structure that they wouldn't have if you beamed anger into it. So yeah, water is holy, as far as I'm concerned. All water that's pure is holy. There's not just special holy water that it can do this. But one more thing about but the production of remedies, they're all created in glass tubes, which you make first you make a mother tincture. You take a few drops of that, put it into a glass vial, shake it many times. Take a drop from that, put another solution, shake many times. This is how you make the remedy very dilute. The interesting thing about that is, which augments even the water, is that the glass is made of silicon, and so little nanoparticles of silicon will infuse every remedy. So if silica is also a homeopathic remedy, and what it does is it transduces energy, brings energy from one level to another, and so that actually imparts something additional to the power of the remedy, and that's just a fortuitous development. Nobody had planned on that, but that is what it does. Silica is an amazing remedy in so many ways. It makes what's inside the body come out. If you bought it over the counter, it might have a single indication. They'll say for the extrusion of splinters. What? I mean, this is a remedy which does many things, but what it does in terms of transducing energy, making energy from within come out, it will push a splinter out. But in a more general way, it will also take someone who's very detail oriented, who's very held back, who's somewhat held back and overly sensitive, will make that person less timorous. And in consequence of that, and they will that will resolve skin conditions and digestive problems and the existential question of am I worthy of putting myself forth?
I like that. I like that very much. And yes, there's so much here. And of course, that is why people need to read the book, because it's that unraveling that is fascinating as you go through each of these questions and the physical aspects and the emotional aspects, and why you're using what you're using to treat. So thank you very much. And just a reminder that the book that we are discussing is The Emotional Roots of Chronic Illness, Homeopathy for Existential Stress. And you have it there.
Yeah, and it's available through Simon & Schuster. If you simply Google that title with my name, it will come up. And
I will be putting a link to it in the description box, Jerry. So, and it's much easier for everyone to find it. Now, if people want to find you, what do you have a website?
I have two. I have one for my practice, which is vitalforcehealthcare.com. And then I've written 5 other books. So you could find that at my publishing outlet, which is rightwhalepress.com. The poor right whale, there are only 360 of them left in the world. But it's the RIGHTWHALE whale, rightwhalepress.com. And that's you'll find my other books. The book previous to this, people might get a kick out of too, which was Sane Asylums. I think I talked about that before. Sane Asylums, the success of homeopathy before psychiatry lost its mind, which is a history of these magnificent utopian mental hospitals in the United States that has been buried. It's been history that's been suppressed because it's so inconvenient to the gigantic psychopharm industry. There really is homeopathy offers a fantastic alternative to our antipsychotic drugs, which cause so much trouble, create conditions we never had before. So if people want to find out about what happened there, they could take a look at Sane Asylums, also by Simon and Schuster.
Well, I already was going to invite you back to discuss that particular book too. So I hope that that's a conversation we'll be having before too long.
I hope so, Anna. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. You're a wonderful interviewer.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be looking at alchemy. Until then, goodbye.